G'day, today draw an anaconda. Get your pencils and pens ready, let's go. So today I'm drawing the anaconda and I am using photograph, and I'm going to show you how I use photographs. I never get 100% of the information from the photo. I get it from my experience, I get it from other sources, and I make up a lot. Check this out. So here's the photo I'm using, and this is a young anaconda, and you're going to see I've got other references here. This is where I drew that picture at the zoo, and it was difficult. I've had some hard sketches before, but that was really hard. I mean, sketching alligators, sketching snakes, that's the hardest. Even devils, but no, that was the hardest because of those kids. Now, here's one that I did before. Check the link in the description. I'm using this picture and that picture, putting them together to help with the references, and I'm going to draw something like this. I did this quick rough sketch before I started, something like that. So with all this information, let's see if we can make a picture. We're starting off with an oval. See, a nice flat oval. And see, I'd probably use lots of lines because I'm not quite sure exactly where to put it and it might change. I've popped in a little bit of a chin there. Let's do the front of the chin, and the mouth is going to go there. Might strengthen that mouth later. At the front here, it's the front of the snout, sort of where the nose is. It's coming around here. One of the bulges there for an eye, and another bulge here for an eye. And that's the back of their head. And the rest of it's in the water as it's swimming along. Okay, so let's have a look at the photo here. And the photo, the eye is quite big on this, and what we probably want to do is get it smaller, because if we get a smaller eye, it makes the snake look bigger. Have a look at my sketchbook here. See, there's tiny little beady eyes. It makes it, there's a bigger, larger anaconda than the photo. So when you're looking at a photo, you don't have to copy it exactly. In fact, it's better if you don't. Now the back of the head here, I'm going to have to move it. See? Okay. This is what we call perspective. So you see those eyes there, they're a bit like that. So the back of the head, that bump there, there's another line coming through. The other bump has to come out here to make it look right. Perspective. You're going to imagine the lines going into the distance. I'll rub that bit of a line out there. So the original oval stretched out a bit. Roughly put where these scales between the nose and the eye is going to go. There's kind of a triangle scale there. And kind of a, what do you call it, like a diamond shape scale in there. And here is where the nose hole is. Now you see those lines going back, so if that nose over there must be about there, roughly. So let's finish this scale, which is kind of part of the nose or under the nose, and creates another little triangle scale there. Now this doesn't have to be perfect, because this is a young juvenile anaconda, and as it grows up, it might, the scales probably change a little bit. So don't worry too much when things are not exactly perfect. Popping a scale on the front, now we're putting these long, thin ones down here. And pop a few little scales in between here. Few flick of the lines there, swish them out there. That's the water moving. Now the scales on the bottom lip here, I find with nearly every species of snake that they don't quite line up. If you do make them line up, it doesn't sort of look right. If you have them not lined up, it makes the mouth stand out more. few little bumpy scales under there. And see, I'm just sort of putting little scales sort of spiraling out from the eyeball there. And I'll show you the final picture too every now and again so you can copy from that as well. But here I'm just sort of popping in a few scales there. There's just a bunch of letter U, letter V shapes there. Now you see a scale flat on and a scale side on. The side on looks very narrow. So at the top of the head here, we're going to be putting very flat, narrow scales. So you lose a lot of the detail on top of their head here through a combination of the light shining on it and that the scales are kind of just flat on their sides. I'm not making the markings quite the same as the photo. I am actually making it a little bit more like a big adult anaconda. I'm basing it a bit more on the one I saw in the zoo. I kind of like to base it on ones I actually see more so than photos. So here we can probably do a little bit of a crosshatch line there and change those to scales, put them in very gently. And crosshatch some of the back here, and here we go. Exchange most of those for a scale, and you're not going to be too far out. Little shine in the eye there. It's looking alright. Now imagine a letter V on its side there. That's what we're going to make part of the chin. It comes out from there, and this is kind of the reflection in the water. Reflection or a shadow, take your pick. I want to put something in the water there. A few swishy lines here to make it look like water, and we're almost ready for the inking. Now you can use a felt tip marker or a pen of some sort if you like. Or if you've got a paintbrush, it's always very handy to have a paintbrush. You can use a paintbrush. I like the paintbrush because it gives a bit more of a swishy, flowy line. And I'm using Indian ink. Somebody asked me once, what sort of ink do you use? I said, just Indian ink, because I'm old school, and because I'm old, I like to use Indian ink. So as I go over the lines, I put the occasional squiggle and sometimes a few dashes here, like a little bit of shade, a bit of texture. It's the kind of thing that makes a picture look cool. If you look at old illustrations, old comic books, things like that, those guys always used a paintbrush, and they're able to get quite a few cool black and white details with a paintbrush. But like I say, you can also use marker pen. Sometimes you can get marker pens that have got like a brush tip on them, which are kind of okay, but I guess after years of using a certain thing, I'm just so used to using a brush that I'd rather use a brush. So I can use the one brush to do pretty much all of this inking. I'm going to speed some of this up so as not to bore you, because from this point on mostly it's just going over the outlines and occasionally adding a little bit of texture here and there. So one of the more important things in this is to look at how I make the top of the head those sort of thin flat scales because they're on their side. Then you get the full shape of the scale on the actual side of the face. You'll find this handy whenever you're drawing any sort of reptile. Adding a little bit more shade to the bulge at the back of the head there. And on some of these scales I'm just putting little dots and dashes, slash a few lines around, making it look sort of rough and uneven. And sometimes with drawing, The real skill is to make it look like you've just knocked it out really easily, like a rough sketch. So again, on the side of the neck here, you see you have the full scales like a letter U, and then we have these flattened out brackets more along the back, and it's to try and make it look like it's wrapping around the snake. And if you're new to this channel, that's called foreshortening. Here I'm just sort of doing some watery effects, marking in that sort of shadow or reflection in the water under the chin there. I'm just adding a few final touches now. A few marks here so it doesn't look too perfect. Okay, a few little dots, little circles, bits and pieces. On the back of the neck here, I'm going to add shade in some places to make it look like the start of the patterns that are down the whole back of it. So just a few little blotches here as the neck starts going into the body, and that's when all the patterns start. I might even put a little drip of water off its chin. And there's the final picture. And that was the how to draw the anaconda video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Check out some of my other videos, and I'll see you next time.